Lisa, Connie, welcome.
Thank you.
We're here to talk about the decisions that parents have to make about their children's consumptions of technology. I just want to start right off the bat. What are you hearing when you're talking to parents about how they're interacting with technology within their families? Are they anxious? Are they concerned? Are they interested in integrating more technology? What are you hearing?
I would say we definitely hear the whole spectrum. I mean, anything that any of you maybe have felt yourselves or any friends that you might have, whether they're parents or not, about anxieties around technology, we hear at the library. We hear families who are concerned about too much screen time, who completely abstain from it. We hear families who feel like their children are basically experts, and so they just leave it to the child instead of having those interactions with them. And then we see everything in between. And at the library, our goal really is, as many of you probably know, we curate material. So our goal is really to provide a scope of content, regardless of the medium, for families. And so when we interact with the families and there's that anxiety, we can point them to content, regardless of that medium, that can help reduce that anxiety, among other things that we do as mentors to the families.
And Lisa, you're a researcher. What are you hearing?
Yeah, and a parent, and so is Connie. And so there's both what you're hearing, and then there's both what you experience every day, and the anxieties that are there. So it absolutely runs the gamut. I mean, over the past, let's say, decade or so that I've been interviewing families and also looking at the research and the surveys on what parents are experiencing, there's certainly anxiety out there. There's also a sense of possibility. And that's where the tension is. There's a feeling, there's that feeling of missing out that even parents wonder about when it comes to whether they should be enabling something new for their kids and wanting to make sure that they're giving them a way to experience kind of digital life that's healthy at the same time that they are aware of how it may impede their sleep or how it may be affecting kind of social interactions. And finding that balance is just really hard today, and it's very hard because every family is so different. It's very hard because parents are so stretched. So I feel like what we're hearing is, and understanding is, that there's a feeling of overwhelm and there's a feeling of anxiety and there's a desire for support and help and less judgment. And that's really what we're hearing that parents want.
Absolutely. When you're giving advice to parents that might be worried about what cell phones are doing to their children or what their children are doing on cell phones or different types of technology, what is the advice that you're giving to parents who are just really trying to keep up?
There's one quick little mantra that I often give to parents when I'm talking about what I've seen in the research, and that is to focus not just on the amount of time that a child is spending, say, on a device or in watching TV, but to look at the 3 C's, to look at the content, to understand the context in which the children are experiencing something, and to think about the child, himself or herself, like, what are they really interested in? What do they love? What makes them crazy? What's making them have a tantrum? And to really tune into that individual child. So those kinds of questions, if a parent asks them, that can help them start navigating through and making some of their own kind of family-focused decisions about this. But there's still some unknowns out there, a lot of unknowns out there, right? And the technology is changing all the time. So that's why I'm really excited to have Connie here with us, because some of the things we're seeing in our research, as I said before, is that parents may need some help and want some support, and finding people who can be mentors to them, and librarians really could be kind of key mentors to them, can be a really nice way to help parents in navigating all of this.
Connie, how is that mentorship kind of relationship with the kids going? Do you see yourself as a kind of supplement to the education that they're receiving in schools? Is it kind of an independent relationship that you're trying to cultivate in the library? How is that happening?
So the library is definitely a puzzle piece in like the larger education of the community. There's certainly formal education that the children receive from schools, but the library is a place where where families come before they ever go to school. It's a place that they come as a family, whereas school is, a place where a child goes individually. So we see ourselves as a place where people can come and yes, supplement what they're learning in school, but also take that journey on like upon themselves, that education journey. So things that we do in the library around technology, for the older kids, we do things like coding programs and 3D printing and virtual reality exploration. And those are things that we want to give to the people in our community in order for them to become excited about technology, but also to learn how to use it together and responsibly. I think probably the biggest piece of advice that libraries give to families is about doing things together, which sounds a little cheesy, but when we see that when parents use the technology with their child, they're not only modeling good behavior, but they're talking about it. It's not about the technology, it's about what you do with it and the outcome afterward. So when they are playing on an app together in the library and then there's an extension activity afterward, it doesn't become about that iPad or about that tablet, it becomes about what was learned. Which is really the crux of media literacy. It's about how do you learn from something. And I think sometimes that anxiety comes from being caught up in, or the anxiety around media comes from being caught up in the technology itself, when it's really about that content. Or it's really about what you're creating with it. So when we do 3D printing activities, it's not about like this cool gadget. It's about what is it that you can do to change your life with this technology.
You hear a lot of the times that the classic dinner table, ideology, that this is the time, the place where families spend time together, and that's a thing that has been lost as technology has kind of made its way closer and closer into the home. But it doesn't exactly sound like that's it at all, right? That it's about generating excitement, and that dinner table experience can be something that you can integrate technology into instead of something that erodes.
Right, exactly.
Connection.
Yep. Like when Lisa was just talking about context, and this is something that I know we've had this conversation a lot in the work that we've done together. When we're talking to individual families, everybody's context is different. So some families might really need that family time without a device at the dinner table, and that works for them. But there are other families who, based on their schedule, and it's not like completely their fault. Maybe it's just the way that their jobs work or the way that their child's care schedule is. Maybe dinner time is individual time, and that's okay. And maybe individual time means it's time to catch up on social media, or maybe the child, for them, it's time to, build something a little bit in Minecraft, and then they can show their family afterward. It's not up to us to judge those particular moments. It's about us giving the tools to find those times to engage together and learn from it together.
Absolutely. You talked a little bit earlier about media literacy. How has the changes in technology over the years changed the way that we as educators, policymakers, just the general public prioritize media literacy? How are you seeing that?
Mm-hmm. Do you want?
Well, first, it's been really interesting to me as a parent to be thinking about media literacy as my kids get older, and to be thinking about it developmentally, like over the ages. It used to be something that was just, something that maybe middle schoolers and high school students who are in journalism classes might understand a bit of, or maybe you don't get to it till you're in college, and you really have to understand sources and who's behind everything. Now, we have tools and we have more understanding of how even young children's brains work to know that there's ways to introduce them to concepts of media literacy at young ages, so that they're thinking about who the author of a picture book is, or how did that author or illustrator actually create that book, and what decisions did that person make as they created it. They now have the tools for little kids, 4 and 5-year-olds, to create their own books and to think about the process of making decisions about what pictures they left out and what pictures they put in. And so we have the ability now to be helping to ingrain a sense of critical thinking about media at younger ages, if we can use the tools well to do that. But obviously, as we've heard in some of the other panels too, we have a moment where technology has enabled a lot of, whether it's fake news or just misinformation and disinformation or misunderstanding about information or sharing, then you didn't even realize that you were sharing something that was false. And so we both have the pros of technology and deeper understandings are going to help us, and we have so much more amplification of problems, and we've got to work more on the side of really helping to support our children, our families, to have the tools to get through the problems.
For sure. When we're talking about minding the technology use of children, that seems like a responsibility that's spread out among a lot of different institutions, right? Parents, teachers, public services like libraries. And when we're talking about things like the dangers of distracted parenting and modeling responsible behavior, it seems like we're trying to balance that judgment or trying not to judge families and trying to understand them in kind of a socio-political and also like a cultural context. How are you finding that these environments differ from family to family, and how are we kind of dispensing advice in ways that work for individuals?
I'll say right now, I mean, I do think this feeling of being judged is so real for parents today, and there's a socioeconomic kind of status overlay to this judgment that can be really pernicious. So I get the sense, just even in some of my own, own friend groups, more usually white, more privileged environments, where there's a sense of, oh goodness, how could those families let their children watch TV for X number of hours per day? Well, there may be all sorts of different environments you don't understand about different families and what their needs are, and there may be kind of a reversal of how can those families be hovering over their children for so many hours of a day and not letting them have any freedom, right? And so I think that we are at a time where we need more empathy and understanding about different families and how they're coming to use media in different ways with their kids, that recognize that parents really are trying to do the right thing for their kids, and they're also under an enormous amount of pressure, especially in the United States where there's no paid family leave, and there are barely living wages for most parents, and 1/4 of college students have kids. So we're not recognizing, I think, the diversity of families and the struggles that they're coping with when we're making some of the judgments we do.
Yeah, I know one of the families that Lisa and I talked to, there were two kind of extremes that we talked to, and one mom completely abstained from screen time, and she even acknowledged that was a privilege, or she thought of it as a privilege to be able to do that. And then another mom had the attitude of, well, my child knows how to use it. She can take my phone and go on YouTube and watch these videos. But she also was using that time to go to the library, use the internet, 'cause she didn't have it at home, and do graduate school work. So, it's a really interesting thing when we're at the library and we see both of these families, and it becomes very easy to look at what's happening and make the assumption that this one family where the child is on the device and the mom is on the computer, that she's on Facebook, or that she's doing something that is not worthy of that time. And it can be very easy to make the assumption based on the visuals that the other mom is being the good parent. But how do you say that when you have the other mom who's educating herself and trying to become, she's trying to empower herself to be a better parent or to be better at whatever it is that she does. And the library is a great place because it's really all about that equity and bringing people in no matter what their socioeconomic status is, no matter where they've come from, and we treat all of them with that same mentoring respect. That we're here to help them through the path that they've chosen. We're not going to tell that family that abstains from technology that they have to use it because that's their choice. We have the content that we provide, but we don't force that content on the people. And that's what why the library is a great place for these kinds of conversations.
I have one more question before we take it to the audience. What are some of the challenges as technology is developing and there are newer and newer sources of information? How is the library, what are the constraints for you to keep up and continue to provide your services? Lisa, in your research, what are the anxieties that you think you'll be dealing with in 5 years, in 10 years, and how is the research that you're doing now helping?
So that's definitely a worry that I think a lot of librarians and libraries have because, media was practically the same for a very long period of time, and that's what libraries use were books and print media. And very rapidly in the last couple of decades, it's shifted. And so the workforce in libraries is having to shift, whether it's somebody who's been in the library workforce for a long time or somebody who's new. They need to learn how to use this new technology. And I think that's one of the biggest hurdles that we have is the comfort of the staff. So we've developed a peer mentoring setup for our staff where we figure if we're going to be mentoring these families, then one of the best ways to train each other is to mentor each other. So I think a lot of libraries are leaning on this idea of identifying those experts in the library who already work there, and having them come alongside the other staff who might need more of that mentorship, so that then they become mentors of the families that come in through the door.
Awesome. Yeah, and what I've seen is, so in the library that Connie's talking about, this is in Maryland, a county just north of Baltimore, where there are resources. There are people who are professionals who have a time and ability to really start thinking about this. What I worry about is that in many places, our teachers and our librarians and our caregivers, our adults who are charged with helping the next generation, are not given the resources and the time and the professional learning experiences they need to really be able to do what they need to do in the digital age, to navigate this new world, to better understand it, to be looking at the research when they can, or to at least be keeping up with other professionals in their field. And so we need to kind of shift our priorities so that we're really focusing on developing our humans who are around our kids as much as we're developing the technology. And until we can ensure that we're continuing to develop our humans, I think that we're on a precipice here where we're not going to be able to really help, especially those kids who need the most help.
I think that's a good note to go to one question in the audience.
Hi there, David Lewis, MCPHS University. Thank you for this topic. Thank you for addressing it. One question that I had was that we have sort of framed this in terms of the adults or the parents catching up. And while I entirely appreciate keeping it judgment-free, how do we address parents and adults who are themselves over-immersed in digital media, who are binging, who are role-playing online to what could seem like excess?
I would say that some of that comes from having moments where parents can do a little bit of self-reflection, and again, do it in a space that's not entirely judgmental. I think that what happens is we close down conversations with parents when they are being kind of told that they're not being good parents. And we've seen that in the research before, that that's not a way to open up the conversation. So instead, we need to kind of give some moments for just some maybe even peer conversations, the way they're doing at the library in Harford County, where they can kind of think about, how did I use media today? And should I have had a moment to put my phone away so that I could have had a longer conversation with my child? But we need to be a little more intentional and more focused on creating those moments so we can really think about how we're using the technology.
And at the library, a lot of libraries have really focused on play for children. We in Harford County, Maryland, we have a number of branches that have interactive play spaces. And our strategy as librarians, and this isn't just with families, this is with any customer who might come in through our doors. We don't wait behind a desk. We don't wait for that question. We're out among everyone who comes in through the doors to have those conversations. So when we have those families come in, and oftentimes, it might be that it's a parent who seems distracted, we engage with them. So it's not about going up there and saying, hey, I need you off your phone, you're here with your child, bye. We go up and have that conversation and say, hey, what are you guys doing today? And maybe did you see this really cool activity over here? Let's walk over and I can show you how to do it. And we basically just kind of create that relationship. So it's not about the moment of stopping, it's about creating that relationship so when they come back, they know that they can trust us with those conversations. I talked too long and then I didn't follow, so.
Well, Lisa, Connie, thank you so much for being with us. Sure.